Hi, everybody. Ian Bremmer here, and NATO summit. Everyone's talking about it. President Trump just arrived, greeted at the airport by Turkish President Erdogan. And I think this is a less important NATO summit than many that we've seen, in the sense that it's going to be less disruptive. The Europeans are spending significantly more on defense. That's particularly true for the frontline states that are prioritizing and dealing with the fallout of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's also true, particularly of the Germans, who are basically breaking through their own fiscal and indebtedness constraints to ensure that they can improve their own defense and take a leadership role in Europe accordingly. The Ukrainians, of course, also doing a lot more and doing a lot more successfully, which means that Trump does not have the argument of the Europeans aren't spending after I've been demanding that they do. He's going to focus a lot more on individual European countries that he says are disloyal because they were not willing to support the Americans on the Iran war. We've seen already an announcement of some pullback of American troops from Germany, for example. We're seeing less willingness of the Americans to lean into further exposure with many of the countries that the United States feels have been challenging for him. And you'll see, I'm sure, a little bit of fireworks with the Italians on that front, with the Germans on that front, with the Brits on that front too. And yet, I think the bigger takeaways are that the Ukrainians are winning their war now. They're actually taking land back, and they're causing a lot more casualties than the Russians are causing to Ukraine, and they're causing a lot more damage to the Russian economy in the past months than the Russians have done to Ukraine. And Trump likes a winner. And he knows he's not getting anything from pushing the Russians towards a ceasefire. He's not looking like a peace president on that front. So I think that this week's visit between Trump and Zelensky is going to be more successful. And that should lead to progress in terms of provision of American interceptors, missile interceptors for Ukraine, and that the Europeans are paying for. And it should also lead to progress on the joint missile production efforts that the Ukrainians have been working for, and that would have less impact on Russian missile strikes in Kiev near term, but it still will matter for how the future of the war is fought. So I think that's going to be seen as a pretty significant win. Overall, NATO, I would argue, is stronger than it was before the war, even though there is less perceived reliability of the Americans, at least as long as Trump is president, and the Americans don't want to do as much. But NATO is larger, having expanded to a couple of NATO countries. Support and integration with the Ukrainians matters because they are spending so much more and learning so much more in how to fight with advanced weaponry, with artificial intelligence, with advanced drone warfare, and that redounds to the advantages of the Europeans and the Americans, and decisively not to Russia. It's, I guess, stronger also because we're seeing the Europeans increase their own defense production capabilities. That not only are they spending more money, but historically that money has been spent in the United States on American producers. That's going to be less the case going forward. Now, I think the political announcements will still show a lot of engagement with U.S. firms. But a lot of those are going to be in partnership, where the Europeans will demand more technology sharing, more of the investment and the capital spend inside Europe itself. We're seeing that with the Canadians too, that they want to diversify. So if they have to spend more, but they spend more because not just they're being pressured by the Americans, but also because they mistrust the Americans, then over time, the hedge is going to be more autonomy, and that means less money for the United States firms, less jobs in the U.S. So that's the be careful what you wish for element of what we're seeing from the unilateralism and the more short-term transactional style. But still, overall, like the G7 summit that I think was pretty well managed in Evian by President Macron just a couple of weeks ago, I suspect that Mark Rutte is going to do a pretty good job in managing this one. Now, he's not seen as much of a leader as opposed to when he was the prime minister of the Netherlands. But because he doesn't have a domestic constituency anymore, he can say many of the exceedingly flattering things to Trump without undermining anything but his own position. But it doesn't hurt NATO. He's essentially doing the dirty work that needs to be done, but that European leaders don't want to do and politically are constrained from doing. And it is facilitating a more stable relationship. So much as we're seeing lots of headlines on momentous NATO summit, I don't think it's a momentous NATO summit. I think it is a more stable NATO summit where what you come out with and the joint statements are generally more aligned and closer to what they were at the beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian war in the Biden administration than they are now in the middle of this second Trump administration. We're, in a sense, going back towards normalcy with NATO, much as we are in the Strait of Hormuz on the back of this war in Iran, much as we are with U.S.-China relations that lack trust but are more stable than they were on Liberation Day. So a little less uncertainty, a little less volatility, and hey, in the middle of the summer with August coming up, that's something we can all appreciate. Thanks much, and I'll talk to you all real soon.